When I have friends come around and visit the setup that I've got here who are not themselves into music production in any way, the one thing that universally surprises them about the way that I'm set up here more than anything else is the fact that I still use floppy disks for a lot of my instruments. Now, floppy disks are of course absolutely synonymous with music production for people in the know and people who use these instruments, but of course they're not without their flaws. Back when they first came about, obviously they're a fantastic solution compared to what we had before, but as time's passed the floppy disks themselves have become volatile, difficult to get hold of, and more importantly the drives on the instruments themselves with moving parts have begun to fail. Now, up until recently floppy emulation was something that I'd taken a vague interest in, but the expensive cost, coupled with the fact that the floppy drives on my units were still working, meant that I wasn't really that bothered by it. That is, until the drive on my Akai S900 failed on me. I've got it here. This was a couple of weeks ago and it just simply wouldn't load floppy disks anymore. So I had a quick look around on the internet at what solutions were available, and I was presented with the option of an HxC flashed Gotek. Now, as far as I'm aware, this is a relatively new solution compared to the HxC drives proper that are available for a number of years now. Now, this one here I got off an eBay seller. I will put a link in the description, but I'd imagine that as the months pass that seller will change. So just in general terms, this is a Gotek USB floppy emulator flashed with the HxC firmware, software, whatever you want to call it. Now, this one cost me, I think, £44 delivered, and it came with an 8GB USB stick. Now, the USB stick's capable of containing more than 1,000 floppy disk images, but because I've only got a 3-digit display on this instrument, we can only load up 000 to 999. It's 1,000 floppy disk images. But still, considering that you've got it on one USB stick that's easy to back up on the computer, it's probably more than I'll ever use in my lifetime now. So, installation of these things is relatively easy. All you have to do is pop out the old drive, plug this one in a similar way. I had a few issues because I didn't realise that the notch on the data ribbon cable was on this drive here, so I connected it up the same way around. In fact, it needed to be twisted upside down and plugged in so that the notch did match up with the notch on this drive. Once I'd done that, it was simply a case of creating a disk image, or rather finding a disk image online suitable for an Akai S900, which I was able to find with the help of a friend. We loaded up the disk image and we loaded up the configuration file. After that, it booted up fine. We could read it, load it, save it. After that, we took it out, copied the disk image, created 1,000 different versions of it, and there we have it. Now this instrument effectively works with this disk drive. I'll just turn it on so that we can see what's going on here. Okay, so here we go. We've got disk image number 3. You can just about see that there. If we go disk, clear memory and load entire disk, enter, and there we have it. It's loading. We have the activity light on the drive there. And there we have it, loaded up, and we're back to no activity. And changing the disk image is as simple as scrolling through with these buttons here. As long as it's not active, you can scroll through. Then we click disk, and then here we can see we've got a different disk image. Clear memory and load entire disk image, enter. And there we go, now we have it loading up a different sample disk. Now, the only real drawback to converting to a Gotek drive, if you've already been using a floppy drive for a number of years, is that it is quite difficult to convert the floppy disks, so floppy disk libraries, over to USB. It can be done if you've got an old XP system or something earlier even with an integrated floppy drive. Then you can use programs such as OmniFlop, rip a disk image, and you should be able to load it with this. With the Akai S900, I didn't bother simply because it just seemed like too much hassle, considering that I don't really have that many discs with loads of samples on. I thought I'll just wipe the slate clean, start from the beginning. Okay, so once I'd finished this, I thought, well, now that I've done this one out of necessity, I might try to do the Akai ASQ10 out of curiosity, as it were. I'd read around online and it looked like you could do it, so I got a similar drive from the same seller and installed it, and lo and behold, it does work, the same as the other drives. So if we go disk 4, load file, and there you go, there's Dosage is the name of the song. Load the file, loading up. We've got activity on the drive down here. That's stopped, and there we have it, that should be loaded up. Installation of the drive on this one was slightly more tricky. It wasn't until I was able to find a forum post of somebody else who'd done this exact unit themselves after some considerable searching that I realised that the data cable on this one had to be flipped upside down, the opposite. So when I was doing the Akai S900 and I accidentally connected it upside down, I was doubly aware that I wasn't going to do the same thing with this one, when of course that's what I had to do in the end. With this one, I was in fact able to rip one disk image because I was much more concerned about getting years and years worth of compositions off of the floppy drive and onto the USB stick. But out of the 3 disks that I attempted to rip using an old PC, only one of them actually worked. I'm not entirely sure why that is. I think it's just they get somehow corrupted, but they still seem to work in this but not in the PC. But in the end I was able to get off most of my recent stuff, which is all I was really that bothered about. So now I've upgraded to this. Now in the S900 you can see the original drive was slightly bigger, so there's a bit of a gap there, but I might blank that out with something eventually. While I was doing it I decided to get a new screen for this as well, and I think they do look really good, and it's definitely easier to read than the old screen. I went with green, which is not original, not faithful, but I just like the look of it. It's like a fake Fairlight. And on the ASQ10 it fits beautifully in the little slot here and matches the colour quite well, so looks pretty good. In terms of documentation of how to perform these upgrades, there's very little online, but I've managed to cobble together the disk images and the configuration files that I needed through some messing about. What I'll do is, if anybody needs these disk images or config files, if they just put a comment down below, then what I'll do is I'll try and upload a zip file or something like that with a number of disk images and configuration files. All you really need to do is get a USB stick and format it to FAT32 format, I think. Load up the disk images and the configuration file, and then you should be able to get it to work. Obviously, as I've said, if you want to try and copy your original USB disc, not USB discs, floppy disks, then that can be slightly more difficult. You'll have to get a computer. From the era USB floppy disk drives seem not to work. But, of course, that can be done if you're up for a challenge. So, for £44 per instrument, I was able to upgrade from the original floppy drives, which one of them was broken entirely, one of them was on the way out, and now I should be future-proofed for as long as these instruments last. And it's very easy to back up the files just by taking out the USB stick, putting it in a PC, copying the files off, and there you go, then you've got a backup on the PC. So there you go. I just thought that I'd show this, make a little video, because like I say, there's next to no concrete information on how these floppy disk emulators work online. Well, there's some bits, but it's fragmented and disjointed at best. So like I say, if anybody's got any questions, they can put a comment down below, and hopefully I can provide a little bit of help in terms of getting a few more of these machines updated for USB disks. Okay, cheers, thanks for watching.